Welcome back to Decades of Dominance. Today, we're going to be covering tight ends tiered for the point per reception league. Before we get into the top tight ends that you want to look at in your draft, you might want to check out our running back tiers video. And we had a couple of other guys we wanted to mention real quickly, running backs, before we get into the tight ends that maybe we didn't mention or why we didn't list them. Sean has a couple he wants to bring up.
So yeah, one is Chase Edmonds, and he kind of belongs in that group with like Alexander Madison and Tony Pollard. And they're guys that if the starter in front of them goes down, they've proven that they can step in and produce comparable numbers. So you definitely want to keep an eye on them there. And then Scott, the running back from Philadelphia, Boston Scott, yeah. He has standalone value, and then he's a Darren Sproles type. That he still gets some work even when Sanders is healthy. And if Sanders' week-to-week thing is anything serious, you've got the number one running back in a very potent Philadelphia Eagles offense. So definitely keep an eye out for those guys late in your draft.
A couple of other guys that I'll mention. There were a few talented running backs that we didn't put in our tiers list, and to some extent, that might be because they could sort of serve as handcuffs, but they're being drafted higher than a handcuff, like Philip Lindsay, who's a very talented back, but he's probably going to be the 30% in Denver's rotation this year. But you have to pay a higher price than a handcuff to get him. Marlon Mack's another guy in that kind of category where if they slip in the draft, they're still worth taking, but I don't necessarily want to pay tier 3 or tier 4 price for somebody that is probably going to be an expensive handcuff.
Yeah, I want to get 3 to 4 guys in those tiers list that we got, which was only 30 players long. After those 30 players, at that point, everybody is a handcuff or a flyer. So wait, draft other positions, and then, from that last list that we put up, get whatever bargains fall through the cracks.
And another running back who is worth keeping an eye on and is still potentially a value on some draft boards is Bryce Love for the Washington football team. He was pretty high in the rankings for the Heisman Trophy in college, and then he got injured. He had a bad year. He was battling through injuries, and he came onto the season injured, and he sort of just has stayed in the shadows. But I think Washington is going to take a look at what he can do, and he could potentially come out of that rotation as the lead back. So somebody to keep an eye on during your season.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I liked Antonio Gibson since the Geist release, Gibson's now been going in like the 7th round, which is just like way too high. I think Bryce Love, people are just finally starting to catch on to him. So if you're drafting anytime soon, get Bryce Love before everybody else in your league becomes available or becomes aware of him.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to the tight ends. So tier 1 for tight ends, we have them in an A and B. So the tier 1 tight ends, there's 4 of them, and 1A is Kelsey and Kittle, and 1B is Andrews and Ertz.
Yeah, I mean, Kelsey's still the king, and Kittle is just a hair below him. Some people are even ranking Kittle ahead of Kelsey, especially with the injury to Debo. I know, Joe, you are. So, again, if you can get those guys in like the mid to late 2nd round, go ahead and pull the trigger. They're worth sacrificing an RB or wide receiver spot to have that positional advantage every week.
Last year, they were about 30 points better than tight ends below them, and I value Kittle a little bit higher because, A, he missed a little bit of time with an injury, and he still caught, I believe, over 100 balls, and he had very few touchdowns, so I'm going to check on that right now. So, yeah, 5 touchdowns. He had 85 catches on 107 targets, and he only played 14 games. So if he had played all 16 games, where would his numbers be? And the touchdowns should go up. He's a big red zone target. Who else is were they going to throw to in the red zone? So I think Kittle, as well as he did last year, actually scored less than he could have. And I think he didn't do what an Aaron Jones did, where Aaron Jones put up, what did he put up? 16 touchdowns, 19 touchdowns last year.
19, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
total.
So Kittle is a guy who should have more touchdowns and potentially could catch more passes. I mean, he could have 100 catches. So if I have Kittle and Kelsey on the board for me, and it's a coin flip, I'm taking Kittle this year. I know Kelsey's been the king, and maybe he's still the king, but just a gut feeling I have.
Yeah, I would stick with Kelsey, but it's a coin flip almost to me.
Yeah, and then if you don't get one of those two guys, Andrews and Ertz are elite tight end options, and either of those has the potential to compete in points, even though they were 30 points behind last year. They have the potential to scoot up and become, it wouldn't be shocking to me if Zach Ertz or Mark Andrews was the tight end too.
Yeah, I mean they were behind the big two, but then the next group is significantly behind them, and then the next group is significantly behind them. So
Right.
there are some pretty wide gaps between these tiers, more so than in other positions, I think.
I agree with you that I would take Andrews ahead of Ertz. Tier 2, we have that broken up into Tier 2A and Tier 2B as well. Starts with Evan Ingram, Hunter Henry, Darren Waller, and then 2B is Tyler Higbee, Gronkowski, and Jared Cook. I know you
Yeah.
like Ingram.
So yeah, I'm probably higher on some of these guys than others are. I like Ingram after the big four. Health is obviously the major concern with him. A lot of people are really low on Hunter Henry. I think I'm probably the only one that has him still ranked this high, but he's extremely talented, and everybody is really discounting. He's not just a product of Phillip Rivers.
I think people
Um,
forget about him.
yeah, he's a stud in his own right, and I think whoever the quarterback is for the Chargers is gonna take advantage of him. Um, I have Waller at 7. Most people have Waller as the 5th tight end behind the big four. I have a hard time trusting Raiders, number one, and they brought in so many other pass catchers. I still think Carr's going to look his way a whole lot,
He
but
will.
they brought in so many other pass catchers. It's going to be hard to duplicate what he did last year. One thing I will say about Waller, he didn't have a single week where he scored less than 7 points last year, not one. And that is extremely rare for a tight end.
Yeah. A Waller is a huge target. Uh, he's a different kind of target than the other wide receivers in Oakland, and I think the I just see a quarterback like Carr resorting to a target like this more often than some other quarterbacks. Like I think he tends to take safer options sometimes, and this is a safe option to throw to. So I think he's going
Yeah,
to
he threw a lot to Cook before Waller got there. So I mean, he's definitely a quarterback who checks down and plays it safe, and that's what a lot of people's problems with him. I'm hoping as a Raider fan that he comes out of that shell a little bit.
Sure, but I still think Waller's a good value here in any of
Yeah,
these spots. I would be certainly happy to get any of those guys. Tyler Higbee, he came on strong at the end of last season, but there was a time during the season where you didn't know if Gerald Everett was going to be the top tight end, and then Higbee kind of came on and took it over. It scares me a little bit that, could that revert? Is he going to keep that role? Or will he keep trucking like he did at the end of last season?
yeah, I have him at 8 simply because like everybody else seems to have him ranked higher, and putting him at 8 and having some of these guys ranked ahead of him, I probably won't end up with Tyler Higbee.
Yeah, I don't necessarily like. For me, I don't like him here. There's a couple of guys you have in tier 3 that I would probably take ahead of Higbee. Um,
I wouldn't take them ahead of Higbee. I mean, 8 is where I would take him between Waller and Gronk. But I'm not going to get him there because somebody else is going to take him earlier than guys like Hunter Henry.
yeah. Yeah,
And
Gronkowski, you point out like he's not as old as people think. He had a year to recover from his health injuries. He's with Brady, and Brady doesn't have familiarity with anybody else on that offense. So, assuming that Brady and Gronk can still play, he could be a real steal at this point. But that's the risk you're taking. Or do they still both have it?
yeah, I don't think his ego will allow him to fail. And like you pointed out, Gronk is the same age as Kelsey, and nobody's saying Kelsey's old and washed up. So
Right. Cook was a steal for a lot of people last year in New Orleans. So
yeah, he produced for the Raiders, went to New Orleans, and quietly had a very nice season for them. He did kind of touchdown dependent, but in that Saints offense with Drew Brees thrown to him, I don't see any reason why he can't be a top 10 tight end again.
Austin Hooper, down here in tier 3, he was awesome last year, and now he went. The issue is that he went to Cleveland, and he's going to be competing with Njoku. If Hooper develops chemistry right away, um, Cleveland, I believe, is going to run a lot of 2 tight end sets. I mean, this is the top guy in tier 3 that you have. The concern is, will like how close can he get to last year's numbers? Is it 80% of last year's numbers? Is it 90%? Is it 50%?
Yeah, last year in Atlanta, Hooper was right behind.
I think he was 3, right? Or
Oh
4?
yeah, he was 3 by like solidly 3.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Closer to Kelsey and Kittle than he was to like Ertz and Andrews
Right.
and the guys.
But that's really the first year
But that was him being in Atlanta, and Atlanta is, I said in another video, um, and this kind of leads into Hunter Hurst, the next guy on the list. Even when Hooper was out, some tight end named Jaden Smith came in and ran the 7th most routes of any tight end during that time frame. So it's in Atlanta's offense that their tight end's going to run a lot of routes. I don't know that that's the case in Cleveland, so that's why Hooper gets bumped down so far and Hurst gets bumped up so far.
Yeah, Hayden Hurst. He's been climbing draft boards to the point where he was a bargain. Who in your draft you may see him being overvalued at this point because he's sort of that sneaky guy that everybody is smart on, and they're going to take him early. And like I would have been happy to get him where he was going at the beginning of the summer. Not so happy to get him where he's going now, but I do think he's going to be a good player. I mean, if you end up with Hayden Hurst as your starting tight end, should be okay, or your backup tight end would be great. You have Hawkinson next, Noah Fant, both in their second year. Showed flashes of potential last year. Either one of those guys could take a big step forward this year. Gesicki is in that same boat as well, but I think he's third year? Is it third year now?
Third or fourth.
And then Goddard is similar. Um, uh, Goddard was fantastic when Ertz was hurt last year. He's still going to be playing in a lot of 2 tight end sets. He's still worth rostering. Certainly, based on injuries, he's proven himself to be a favorite target in Philadelphia. So he's going to get games where you're definitely going to want to bring him off your bench.
Yeah, and reportedly they really love him in Philadelphia. Zach Ertz is getting a little older. He's not as old as Kelsey and Gronk, but he's getting up there, and Goddard's obviously the heir apparent in that offense. Hawkinson is the one that I think a lot of people are underrating, especially with the whole ankle comment. I don't really take that very seriously. I think he's going to be just fine. And I mean, there's a reason why Hawkinson was drafted 8th overall, and Fant was drafted 20th overall. Almost always, Fant is getting drafted ahead of Hawkinson. And to me, that's a mistake. Hawkinson was better when they played together. Hawkinson has less competition for targets this year. So
Right. Well, they're both.
let somebody else draft Fant and draft Hawkinson later.
Fant is a more freakish athlete, and I think that's why people gravitate towards him. Fant was also supposedly the better pass catcher, although, if a tight end is a good run blocker, they're going to be on the field for a lot more plays. So I have those two as kind of a coin flip. If Fant goes first and I get Hawkinson, I'm fine with that, or vice versa, I'm fine with that. I think Fant is a different kind of target than most of the Broncos wide receivers. So again, he's got a second-year quarterback in Lock. So he's going to make himself available to those safe throws in a way that, their speedy new slot receiver isn't, or maybe Jerry. He's not going to be the same kind of target that Judy would be. Courtland Sutton is a pretty big beast, but Fant's got his spot.
Yeah, actually, the rookie that they brought in that worries me the most isn't Judy or Hamler, who's hurt now anyways. But it's that they brought in Drew Lock's tight end from college, from Missouri. His name's like Albert OK something. And I kind of worry that he's gonna take some of Fant's looks as well. And where Fant's being drafted, it's not like I'm saying don't draft Fant, but where Fant's being drafted, it's higher than I have him ranked, and so I'm just not getting him.
Okay. Well, let's move on to tier 4 then. You've got Jonnu Smith here at the top of tier 4, and then Jack Doyle, Blake Jarwin, and Chris Herndon.
Yeah, Jonnu Smith has a potential for a huge leap, taking over for Delaney Walker as the tight end. And who else in Tennessee other than Brown is going to catch any passes? So, Tannehill's got to throw to somebody else. And, maybe it's – yeah.
And Jonnu Smith has had a few more years to learn the offense, but I did have him on my team at times when Walker was hurt. He didn't do a whole lot. But, a couple of years ago, tight ends do tend to be a position that takes a little time to develop.
So they just make that leap.
Yeah, so it could go either way with him. But, that's why they're down here in tier 4. They're not sure bets. Doyle, I like a lot down in this position. Rivers loves tight ends. You pointed this out as well. He's a big, reliable dump-off target, and for an aging quarterback who likes to make safe passes, Doyle's a very safe pick here. I love that. I love that he's here at this spot. You got
and Eric Ebron's not there anymore. Eric Ebron's not in Indianapolis anymore. The other thing I want to mention about Jonnu Smith before we move on is I heard, I don't know if it's a rumor or what, but I heard something like Bill Belichick called Jonnu Smith like the best tight end in the NFL. And, Bill Belichick knows about tight ends because he had Gronk and whatnot. But that's just something interesting to note.
Yeah.
The next guy, Jarwin, everybody is clamoring for him to be like this guy. And, I have him on my list as draftable. But he's getting too much hype, in my opinion. Like, if he was that good, why did Witten get so much use ahead of him last year? Everyone keeps talking about how, Dallas is upgrading, getting rid of Witten, and Jarwin was there last year. If Jarwin was an upgrade over Witten, why didn't he play over Witten?
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, Witten has the familiarity with the system and the rapport with the team and coach and everything, but you make a great point. And then and the same kind of risk level, Herndon, the talent is there. you know, he could be a steal at this point, or he could be a bust.
Yeah, he was a bust that I had quite a few shares of last year, and that really irritated me. But I gotta put him on this list because as inconsistent as he was, he's probably the only tight end left that has a chance to be the best overall receiver on his team.
Yeah, I could see it. And that concludes tier four, but we've got some other tight ends to watch to keep an eye on. I know there's two that you want to mention here. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, Eric Ebron in Pittsburgh now, and Ian Thomas in Carolina are two guys. I wouldn't draft them. I wouldn't draft anybody after the top 20. And then the other guy that I want to mention is Will Disley. I wouldn't draft him, and you don't have to draft him because everybody's thinking that Greg Olson is going to be the number one tight end in Seattle. But when Disley is healthy, he is like a top, like
Yeah.
points per game. He was like tight end 7, then he was like tight end 12. Like points per game, he's a tight end 1 when he's healthy.
Yeah, I had him for a while, and then I had to drop him when he went onto the IR. And every week he was getting at minimum 12 points, and sometimes closer to 20. You know, for a guy that I picked up late, and I was able to start him and get reliable points and better than most people were doing on their tight ends. I was going to mention him as well. Another tight end that I want to mention. Okay, so the only reason that a tight end for the Vikings isn't being drafted is because people don't know whether Kyle Rudolph or help me out, I'm losing his name here.
Irv Smith.
Right, Irv Smith. So Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith Jr. Both had the same number of targets last year, and Kyle Rudolph had 6 touchdowns and Irv Smith had 2, but Irv Smith had like 10 red zone opportunities, and it was he was a rookie. So for a rookie tight end to come in and be an exceptional pass blocker and to have the type of targets that he had, you know, he could start taking over the reins. So Irv Smith Jr. is somebody that I would keep an eye on. People are taking some boards have him ahead of Kyle Rudolph, some have him below Kyle Rudolph, but I like the guy. I like the talent. I like the way he plays, and he's not going to come off the field. They're going to do a lot of 2 tight end sets. I think he'll have more touchdowns than 2. Worth stashing as a tight end 2 at the end of a long draft in a 12-team league. You know, if you're down to your final round pick and Irv Smith Jr. is still on the board, that's somebody I'm looking at.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people, even in 12-team leagues, don't draft a second tight end. So that's why I'm saying a lot of these guys, you know, will go undrafted. But you know, if you don't have anything better to put at the end of your bench, I don't mind taking a flyer on Irv Smith. His arrow is definitely pointing up. Kyle Rudolph's is definitely pointing down. And again, much like Johnny Smith, the Vikings are a run-heavy team, but they're going to have to throw sometimes, and it can't all be to Adam Thielen. And I've heard the rookie wide receiver is struggling there, and you'd have a hard time naming another receiver on the Vikings roster. So
Yeah,
somebody else has got to catch passes there.
yeah, and Irv Smith proved himself to the coaching staff last year. And again, this is year 2 as a tight end. I mean, you almost never see tight ends do exceptionally well in year 1, but they can take a big leap forward in year 2, and that's what I'm looking for Irv Smith Jr. A couple other guys to maybe keep an eye on. Tyler Eifert in Jacksonville. He should start for them, I believe. So that's something to take a look at. David Njoku is somebody to keep an eye on if he would get a trade. If anything happens to Hooper.
Yeah, but I mean,
down at the bottom of the barrel, scouring waivers, Darren Fells, you could do a lot worse than him.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking that deep, you're probably having some trouble.
Right. These are sort of like playable, because this is a position that, I mentioned some of these guys because even if you draft two tight ends, it's a position that's very thin and they get hurt. And almost everybody is scrambling to pick up a tight end later on in the season. So these are just some guys. I'm not saying that you want to draft, but that you want to keep an eye on.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and add another one. Knox, the guy from Buffalo,
Oh, right. Yeah,
was the
absolutely.
rookie last year and played really well. So he could definitely develop into someone that's rosterable.
So if you haven't, go ahead and take a look at our running back rankings. The reason that we did running backs and tight ends first and second is because the depth at these positions is less. You have an easier time getting a serviceable quarterback late in a draft, or in wide receivers. Um, there are some top tier wide receivers, but then there's a nice pool in the middle where there's very little drop off, and the depth at wide receiver is just much much greater.
And you can, like, throughout the season, you can almost always find a guy on waivers that you can immediately pick up off of waivers, immediately throw him in your lineup, and he can at least get you by.
Right, he's going to get you 10 points or
Yeah.
somewhere in that ballpark.
Whereas running back and tight end, that can be a lot more difficult.
Yeah, and I know like teams are making some adjustments this year, right? Because the COVID situation. So in one of my leagues, we're adding additional roster spots. Other teams are doing some things differently. So you have a league, I believe, that's doing unlimited IR, and when you have that, that means less guys are going to get pushed back to waivers. So the depth at waivers is going to be tougher to dig out. The more bench spots you have, the thinner waivers are going to be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Certainly, if this year especially, injuries is going to be a factor.
Yeah, I know a lot of experts will tell you, oh, you don't need to draft the second quarterback, you don't need to draft the second tight end. I always do,
Me
just
too.
because I'd rather pick my guy in a draft than have to pick what's left off of waivers. But especially this year, like you said, with the COVID, if
Hmm.
you're not one of those people that took a backup that took at least a second quarterback and a second tight end in your draft, if you're a person who normally doesn't do that, this is the year to do that.
Yeah, and I've seen people take. This is crazy, but I've seen people take two defenses in the draft. Don't do that. Don't take two defenses. Don't take a
Don't
kicker
ever,
for
yeah,
the final round. And
don't ever have two defenses or two kickers on your roster. Even if, I mean, in my opinion, even if you have the best kicker, whoever that may be, Tucker, Butker, Lutz, whatever,
right.
they're
And the
not
only
worth the
excuse
roster spot.
I can make a case for,
Having a
for
second one.
1 week to have two defenses on your roster, and that's if you have the best or second best defense in the league and you don't want to drop it to somebody else and you just need to get through your bye week. So if you by far have, San Francisco or Pittsburgh or the Ravens and they are 20, 30 points ahead of every other defense and it's week 8 and you don't want to give that away to somebody else, that's the week you keep two defenses and then drop the other one after you're done.
And I mean, if there's anybody out there who's waiting for us to do our kicker tier and our defensive tier show, that's not going to happen. My advice on kickers and defenses is I stream them. I get a new one every week. I know, Joe, you like to draft. You like to draft a solid defense.
Right. Well, okay. So
But
in a dynasty league, I don't like to have to push through waivers a lot because I have maybe one spot where I'm trying to get a guy who's risen to the cream of the crop, and I don't want to have to deal with replacing my defense regularly while I'm doing that. And I'm in another league where there's limited waivers. So because there's limited waivers, I don't want to be replacing a defense and a kicker every single week. If I can get a defense, I actually look for like, is a defense going to be good and do they have a late buy? So I can just sit on them for 10 weeks, 9, 10 weeks. And I don't have to deal with like I don't if a great defense has a bye week in week 4, I'm looking to the second best defense. I'm not looking
I'm
to deal with that early.
yeah, I don't play in leagues anymore that have the limit. You can only have like so many waiver transactions or anything like that. And I'm pretty much like, okay, who is the worst offense in the league? Who's playing them? Are they available? No. Okay, who's the second worst offense in the league? Okay, who are they playing? Is that defense available? That's my defensive strategy each and
And
every.
all, what we're
And I
saying,
don't put in a waiver claim on them. I'll just wait until waivers go through and then pick one up.
yeah, and what essentially what we're saying is, how did this tie into our tight end advice? You really want to make sure you have a starting tight end and a backup tight end. And if you're doing any other silly things like keeping way too many wide receivers or two defenses, don't do that. Get yourself two tight ends. And that should wrap up our tight end video. We're going to hit quarterbacks next. If you haven't watched our running back video, go check it out. It's going to be in the same series. We've got a best ball draft series and a rookie draft, so we cover a lot of players that you might be curious about. Um, just talking draft strategy could help you out if you're heading into your season this year. Anything else you want
And
to
we
add?
do. I was just going to say we do check the comments, so if there's anything that you guys want to, those of you that are watching, would like us to talk about, or specific players you'd like us to address more in future videos, just post them in the comments, and we'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, we're literally just starting out, and the fan base is very small. Honestly, it helps if I mean, it's annoying, but like the video, share it, subscribe. It's if you're getting anything valuable out of the content, share us around. Peace out.
Cool.